All righty. Well, if I could ask everyone to just silently thank the person you just talked with your eyes and remember that person's name. And then choose a real comfortable chair to come in and sit down. And while you do two things, think about coming in closer so that when we get to the discussion part, it'll be easy to hear each other. And secondly, throughout any part of the evening, if you feel inspired to create, if you want to add some fruits and vegetables, we have this beautiful art, this mural going of the fruits and vegetables that everybody loves being created here. So either now or later or anytime this evening, please add to the mural. We would love that. And our amazing artist, Susan, she's just amazing. She has an idea for everything. Even the beautiful pictures. I mean, I was just going to put up signs, that said 1960 on it, and she made them all beautiful. So everyone, please thank Susan. Okay, so how many people met? Our goal was for people to meet at least 5 people they didn't know. How many people met at least 5 people they didn't know? Great. And how many people think they could remember at least 4 out of those 5 names tomorrow? Excellent. You're a very mindful, very thoughtful group. Okay. We're going to dive into the agenda for the evening. You've given me permission to talk about energy, food, climate, the connections, and to be a little wonky. So I thank you for that. And I thank you for being a good sport about our visual demographics. We learned we're about 60%, 40%, 60% women, 40% men. That our 2 biggest age cohorts are people who graduated high school in the 60s, so our boomers, and people who graduated high school in the 2000s, our millennials, and then we're pretty much age distributed throughout that, although we're starting to have smaller numbers of seniors. So just a thing to note, and to be in gratitude for the seniors and all that they have done and the shoulders we are standing on. For the exciting and amazing things that are going on in the food system. So let me dive into all of that, and let me start at the beginning. Not that much of the beginning. Let's go the other way. So number 1. What do you suppose this is? What's this number 1 stand for? Big Ag. You got it. You nailed it. Big Ag is the number 1 industry in the world. Full stop. Number 1 industry in the world. It is also number 1 most destructive in terms of environmentally destructive. We can go through the litany. The insecticides, the pesticides, the killing of the soils, the pollution of the water, the spread through the air of the pesticides and herbicides. The loss of people's lands to big ag. I mean, the list, you know the list, but it is the number 1 industry and the number 1 most destructive. This is the fire alarm moment, If the fire alarm rings right now, that's really important to know. So that you're at the right place at the right time at this summit to be talking about the world's number 1 most important industry, that's also the world's number 1 problem. You can't avoid in the news the connection between other problems. California has been much in the news with their water shortage. And you know from that 80% of California water goes into agriculture. And you may not have heard, it may not be so much in the headlines, but 1/3 of California's energy goes into moving that water around for agriculture. So no matter what you start with, energy, food, or water, they're highly interconnected. The problems are highly interconnected. The good news is that means the solutions are too. That as we solve for a more sustainable agriculture system, we'll also be reducing the water problem, we'll also be improving the climate issue. So very, very clear about that. So another important thing to understand about the agriculture system is that I need to learn how to go which way on these buttons. 4%. 4%, everybody formulating some thoughts about what that 4% means? This means that only 4% of the food we eat are fruits and vegetables by agriculture. By the way, this is by acres planted in the U.S. So only 4% of the acres planted in the U.S. are fruits and vegetables. That also includes things like lentils. So for people eating a plant-based diet, they're literally, this is the 4% they're choosing from. The reason, yes, thank you. Let's hear it for the plant-based diet folks. Yes. The reason why I'm saying this is to illustrate a couple of things, because when you think about the food you eat, you probably think that you eat more than 4% of your diet is fruits and vegetables, even if you are an omnivore. And that's right. Most people, in terms of their plant-based food that they eat, if they're not a vegetarian or a vegan, it's somewhere, depending on how you count plants, but fruits and vegetables, it's somewhere around 40%. So what it means, this is very important to really understand, it means that it's exactly what all the people who are promoting a plant-based diet want to say in one number, which is as you go towards a more plant-based diet, more people can eat more food, because we're only 4% of the U.S. acreage under cultivation is fruits and vegetables, and yet we're providing at least 40% of people's diets with that 4%. Pretty impressive. The other thing that's really important about it is that even if we get 100% of the fruits and vegetables to be local and organic, we still have a big food system that we got to deal with. So it's both sides of the coin. So a sort of system, that's the system wonkiness things. Okay, so diving a little bit deeper into that reality, let's see if I can do my technology. Devin, I might need you to advance the slide here. Can you do that for me? Are you up there, Devin? Can you advance the slide for me? Oops, one back now. Maybe we both. So here's a soy field being doused with glyphosate. It's a GMO soy field being doused with glyphosate Roundup from a helicopter, no less. 1% is up there because only 1% of the soy that's grown in the US and Canada goes directly into human consumption. So that would be like your edamame, that would be like your tofu, but that's only 1%. So again, starting to think about the dimensions, I'm trying to get you to think about the dimensions of the system and what that means. Let me see if I can get the next slide, and if I can't, there we go. So most US soybean goes into soybean meal for livestock feed, poultry being the largest, swine, hogs coming next, and as you can see there. But the message here is that most of the soy grown in this country goes into feed, not food. Soy and corn are our two largest crops, again by acreage. When you see food statistics, by the way, for those of you who are fellow wonks, one of the interesting things to try to ask about that food statistic, is it acreage? Is it dollars? Does it include imports? Does it exclude exports? So you'll often see what looks like conflicting data, and it might be because most of the time when you see crop information, it's usually done in dollars. But I'm basing it all on acreage in this talk to really understand what the food system looks like, and if we want to change it, what we have to do. So soybeans, big crop in the US, most of it goes into feed. Let's see if this will work. Devin, I need you for the next slide. Corn, the other big crop in the country, only 10% goes directly into the food on your plate. And what I mean by that is actually anything that you eat. So table corn is probably less than 0.01%, but that includes the corn in your tortilla chips. It actually, believe it or not, includes the high fructose corn syrup in the awful sodas and other processed food in the grocery store. So only 10% of corn grown in the US goes into food. 45% goes into feed, 40% goes into fuel, and then there's a small percentage that goes into manufacturing other stuff. There might be pieces and parts. One of the more interesting ones recently was we did an article on sustainable condoms. And it turns out that one of the things in a sustainable condom is the starch that goes to make sure that it doesn't that it doesn't get sticky and that goes into the condom. So there's all kinds of things that corn goes into, but only 10% into the food we eat. So again, the idea, if you want system change, you have to think beyond the food you eat. So how many people want to change the entire agricultural system, including food, fuel, and feed and manufacturing? We want it all sustainable. Okay, good. Then we're all together. Let's see if we can, okay. And then, of course, the other piece to understand is it's not just land-based. This is a big salmon farm. And so if we want a sustainable agriculture system, we also have to think about seafood, which is enormously important. I think many of you know the problems with fish farming if it's not done in a sustainable way in terms of the enormous problems it causes. Again, I promise not to go deep into problems, but it's also true if you don't have sustainable seafood. We're talking about fish collapse, fish schools collapse. We're talking about enormous injustice problems. I think coming to light more and more is how awful the Asian, like Thailand and surrounding area, fishing boat problems are. The shrimp boats, there's literally people being captured to go on these shrimp boats. They get literally taken from villages, put on shrimp boats. For a year or two, they don't come into dock. They get no pay, and they're in these terrible conditions. So how many people would agree that fish needs to be in the sustainable agriculture scene? Right, excellent. And then we have, we have cotton, a fiber crop, primarily fiber crop, also one of the world's largest in acreage planted. Arguably, perhaps one of the most destructive in both environment and social justice. In terms of environment, it uses a lot of water, it's heavily pesticided, and in terms of justice, in many places like Uzbekistan, again, we have a child labor, slave labor problem in the cotton fields, and we also have a problem throughout the developing nations where they're they need to put a lot of pesticides on this, because a lot of it is GMO, and in fact, the majority of it is GMO, and we're getting, in the cotton fields in particular, we're having huge problems with what they call huge weed problems, super weeds they call them, and super bugs, particularly happening in the cotton fields. And one of the reasons why it showed up in the cotton fields first is because the cotton is planted in hot areas, and so there's many, many more generations of weeds and bugs, so they outrun the GMOs the fastest. So people are putting more and more pesticides on them and exposing farm workers to more and more pesticides in these fields. And in the developing countries, the pesticides are so expensive and so precious is the farmers actually take the pesticides home and put them under their beds to protect them. So they're literally sleeping on top of their pesticides. So huge problems in the pesticide fields. So are you guys game with including fiber in the sustainable? How many people are in? Okay, great. So again, trying to really, what does it mean to say we want a sustainable agriculture system, food, feed, fiber, fuel? We need to really think about it all if we want it to be sustainable. So let's talk about what we're going for. What's the vision? We did the beautiful picture of vision, healthy, sustainable food for all. Here's the wonky version of it. Where I would assume, based on the 100% agreement we had on the beautiful picture, that what that would be termed, like, okay, we want a healthy, sustainable food system for all. What does that mean? A hypothesis. What would you say that it would mean having nearly all of the acres under cultivation as sustainable and restorative by 2025 to 2030? Is that something people could get behind? Maybe faster? How many people could get behind either this or faster? Okay. I want you to note that that's not crazy, because in 1925, that was the world. Somewhere in the 1920s is when the heavy use of industrial pesticides was introduced. So prior to 1925, some people say, well, Jesus was all organic, and so was Abraham Lincoln, but you don't even have to go back that far. Basically, early last century, most people were mostly organic. So I'm sorry to report, however, that right now in 2015 in the US, barely 1% of acres under cultivation are organic. So again, if you see the quotes on 4 or 5% of the market is organic, that's true because that's in dollars. That means dollars, and it also includes imports. So that's why you get 5%. We're not even quite to 5%, but we are getting to 5% organic in terms of market. But in terms of acres under farmland cultivation, we're only at 1%. So we have a lot of work to do. And what I mean by being wonky is to think about, okay, here we sit with this big goal. It's big, it's visionary. What we say in Green America, we always say we want a big, compelling, visionary goal that seems daunting, and then we're going to move the dial. So how many people are into that? All right. So what I'm going to do is show you how we are moving the dial in many areas of the economy. Particularly, I'm going to do a little bit of case study on energy for you, because while this is daunting, and I want people to be inspired and not depressed, because I believe we can do this. I believe by being very systematic in thinking and really understanding the size and scope of the problem, we can in fact get to that goal in that time stated. And I'm not up here being crazy, and I'm going to show you why. Because we've recently done just exactly that with solar, and I can show you. We as a society have done that as in solar, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about that in a little bit. But let me give you some of the case study. So I just want to say this can be done because it's happening around the entire economy. If you think of the economy as a big circle and then divide it up into sectors, at Green America we divide it up into 12 sectors, energy, food, finance, fair labor, health, etc. There are green businesses in every sector of the economy. They are growing faster than conventional businesses. It's generating more jobs, and they're more likely to be high-paying manufacturing jobs. In American society as a whole, our jobs in terms of manufacturing, the high-paying one that all the politicians talking about, it's down to about 12%. In the green sector, we're at 22 to 25%. So the green sector is actually delivering on the promise. And what was also very interesting, it was the jobs were more resilient during the recession. The green part of the economy had fewer setbacks than the conventional economy. Let's see. Oops. I think I keep reversing the order here. And in fact, some of the things that people in this room have been working on very hard have been growing very rapidly. Fair trade food, organic non-food, things like organic cotton, social investing, green building, renewable energy, all of this growing very, very rapidly. And it's not just it's just not green economy advocates like me talking about it. The U.S. Department of Labor has started to track it, and the U.S. Department of Labor statistics show that green jobs are growing at twice the rate of conventional jobs. So the green economy is in fact delivering. So I'm going to do a little bit of case study on energy, because in addition to food, I would argue that energy is, of course, highly related with food, since so much of the energy in the country goes into food, and so much of the climate change caused in the world is by agriculture, very highly related. But I just want to show you what system change looks like, sort of case study energy, because there's really great news from the outside world. In the past 10 years, there were 150 coal-fired permits filed. 144 of those permits have been pulled, stopped, they will never be built. The head of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission that has to permit and oversee a lot of those coal plants has basically said, we are never going to see another coal plant built in the U.S. The era of coal in the U.S. is over. So all of you that have ever worked to stop a coal plant, thank you. It's amazing. Total U.S. renewables energy in the U.S. right now generate more energy every day than nuclear does. Let's hear it for that too. U.S. renewable growth outpaces fossil fuel growth. So far this year, we're in June of 2015, the only new energy systems that have been brought online are renewable, no fossil fuels. And solar, which we'll dive into a little bit more, solar, which in the year 2000 made agriculture look easy, because in the year 2000, solar was at 0.001% of the energy mix in the US, 0.001%. Really zero, except for a few dedicated people probably in this room that had some solar on their house. But right now, we are on target. My energy team has tracked since the year 2000. We took that curve, you know, that one I showed you for food? We did one like that for energy, and we said, we worked with some climate scientists, and they said that in order to be at a zero carbon economy by 2050, we would have to have 50% of the energy has to come from solar. It's just carbon math. All the other ones have to do their thing too. That's the other 50%. Energy efficiency and all the other ones, they have to do their thing. But we can't solve the energy problem without half of it coming from solar. So, on the day when solar was 0.001%, we set our targets on 50% of the world's energy coming from solar by 2050. People thought we were crazy, but you'll see for sure we're not. We're on our way. So in 2000, we set 50% by 2050. We are moving so much faster than target. It looks like we can do it by 2042 and maybe earlier. It's amazing, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute. So, but in the meantime, it's all good news on the way to that goal, because the solar industry at this point is already producing more U.S. jobs than auto manufacturing, U.S. coal mining, U.S. iron and steel mill industry. The solar industry has already, again, delivered on the jobs promise. And we're at, overall, we're probably at about 5% right now. But can you imagine when we get to 100%? I mean, this is going to be amazing for job justice in the economy. Here again, amazing news. This is what system change looks like. When system change starts to happen, it happens quickly. What you see here is the collapse of the coal industry. Everybody knows Peabody Coal, the largest coal company in the US. Since 2010, the value of their company, the market capitalization, tanked from 10 billion to less than $1 billion. The other three big coal companies, even less. Coal is dead. Market says so. Don't have to be you don't have to be a climate promoter, climate crisis concerned. We're on our way. Just want to, if you can, you know, I mean, this is amazing. In 5 years, coal prices on the market have tanked. That means a whole lot of people think there's no future in coal. And by the way, we'll get to it in food in a minute, but it's happening with food. It hasn't been quite so dramatic yet, but we're seeing the early warning signs. All the big companies, General Mills, Pepsi, Campbell's, Coke, all of their traditional processed food lines are losing market share. The stock prices are soft. They haven't tanked yet, but it's coming if they don't make moves. And they just watch this happen in energy. So we've got their attention, let's put it that way. So this is really, really wonky, but my inner wonk jumps up and down on this one. So California now has 20% of their energy coming every day of the year is coming from solar and wind, 20%. Actually, I could say 30% because the contracts that have already been signed and are in process of being built out are another 10%. So really, by 2017, California is going to be 30% solar and wind every day, day in and day out. Now, what's really interesting about this, remember, it was 0.001 in the year 2000. What's really interesting about this is that, again, within a few years, everybody watched that number tick up. You know, slowly, tick, 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 tick. All of a sudden, in 2008, 2008, peak energy was like it had always been. You guys have heard that, like, energy needs peak during the day, when it's hot and sunny and people are working and the air conditioning is on and industry is going full blast. That's when we use the most energy in the country, right? Logical. And by definition, in an electricity system, supply has to equal demand, because if you don't have enough supply for the demand, you get brownouts and blackouts, right? So the grid operators are very busy making sure that they're calling enough supply to meet whatever the demand is. In 2008, California, that blue line there at the top, had your typical, it's been this way for 100 years, peaks during the day. At night, it's low. During the day, it builds, then about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it's high, and then it slopes back off overnight. Makes sense, right? A mountain. Think of it as a mountain. California now has, during the day, for 40% of the year, with only 20% solar and wind on their system, 40% of the year, they have an energy valley. That changes everything. It means that during the day, they're generating enough cheap, abundant, clean, non-carbon energy to do all kinds of things. They could store it for use at night and get rid of the last gas and nuke on their system. They could ship it to Mexico, so Mexico doesn't have to start fracking. Mexico has not fracked yet, and they're starting to talk about it, but if California could ship them this energy, they could skip that stage. There is so much that could be done. So, hey, it's working. Everything that we've been working for, it's happening. And the thing I'm trying to say here is that it happens fast. 2008, it was like usual. 2009, 2010, 2011. By 2012, it was starting to flatten out. By 2015, let's see if I can make this little thingy work. By 2015, we're having this valley. I mean, it happened within, again, kind of like the coal collapse, this happened within 5 years. People worked for a long time. Again, all of the folks who graduated high school since 1950s, we need to thank them. Everything that you did to educate people, to change their minds, to create consciousness, to put solar systems in, to put wind systems in, it took a long time to build up, but then it happened fast, just like when Rosa Parks sat down that day and started the bus boycott. When the system is ready to change because you've done a lot of work in advance, it moves fast. So hold on to your seat. We're going to have lots of more good news coming. So on the food system, we have also lots of great change coming. Not coming, it is. Farmers markets have quadrupled in the last 5 years. CSAs have quintupled. Seed sales have topped the charts. In terms of sales of product. A lot of times one of the things that economic wonks do is list what products have shown the most growth in the economy. Since the recession, seed sales have been right up there. Home gardens are skyrocketing. Family farms have increased. In the last 5 years, for the first time in 50 years, family farms have increased. And local food efforts are booming. And in fact, this also is a sign of system change. If you can read it from where you are, signs like this are going up all over the country. This one was sent by one of our members from Colorado, but I've seen it in Washington, D.C., and I've seen it in Wisconsin, and I've seen it in Tennessee. To our valuable customers, there is a nationwide shortage of organic milk. As a result, our suppliers have not been able to completely fill store orders. We are doing everything possible to obtain additional supply. And believe me, they're working their butts off to try to get additional supply. We apologize for any inconvenience this causes. This is what system change looks like. People do not want to feed conventional milk to their kids anymore. If you're going to choose a product to be organic, choose first the things that your kids drink a lot of or eat a lot of, right? That's what they're doing. We're actually working with a group of companies to work with the folks who do the food stamps to allow people to buy organic milk with food stamps, because right now it's not allowed. And what people are doing is they're no longer using the food stamps to buy milk, and they're buying other things with the food stamps so that they can go and buy organic milk. I mean, that's the kind of priority that people are putting on organics. So California may lead the way in energy, but Vermont is leading the way in food. I think Vermont is the #1 locavore state. You are the #1 in CSAs, just period, not even per capita. You're the #1 in farm to school, the percentage of food that from farms that go into school. You're #1 in farm markets per capita, and you're #1 in food hubs, which is really important because that's the next system level up. First, you got to get the farms going on organic and local, and then you get the farmers markets going, and then you start figuring out how to connect those markets to local schools and hospitals, and then you start creating the business systems to get the local food and the local and the organic the food everywhere. So the food hubs are really important. It's a sign of the next system level up, and Vermont is #1. So they say when it comes to energy, as California goes, so goes the country. May it be that as Vermont goes in food, so goes the rest of the country. So let's see. And of course, each one of you I know would have 5 companies you could put up here, but High Mowing Seeds is a wonderful Vermont company that does the organic and non-GMO seeds, because it all starts with the seeds. It's so cool. And Vermont, the Farmhouse Group is again an example of the next system level up, where they're starting to put together groups of restaurants that are all local and organic. Jasper Hill Farm and Sterling College, do you guys know that story? I mean, they are amazing. They are collaborating for regional food systems. The folks at Jasper Hill, way up in the Northeast Kingdom here in Vermont, said, we got no jobs. We don't have enough going on here. They picked that place to establish their business. They make cheese, offer raw and organic milk, and a whole line of dairy products. And they said, but we can't do this alone. So they started inviting other people that they knew who were interested in starting food companies, and they invited them up into the same county areas, and they now have a thriving food hub going. They went into collaboration with Sterling College, who's providing research and education, and so now they have sustainable food companies in the region and people coming out of school who are ready to go work at those sustainable food companies. They're revitalizing a whole area. It's really exciting with the different, again, this next level of system that's going on. Oops. And people everywhere are demanding healthy, sustainable food. So this is just one dimension. I picked out this slide. I picked out this data from the Natural Marketing Institute. This happens to be how many people said they purchased a non-GMO product. They specifically looked for non-GMO, and they purchased at least one. And the blue is 2013, the green is 2014. That year-over-year growth from 37% in 2013 to 53% for the overall market. That's phenomenal. That's phenomenal growth. If any of you are wonks like me, to see growth in any sector that's that much in 1 year, that means the system is tipping rapidly. What's really interesting and exciting is take a look at those millennials. They went from 45%, which was the highest of all of them, to 61%, which is now still the highest. But it's very interesting. The millennials are the largest generation that are coming up. They're becoming parents. Everybody who is a parent or a grandparent to a millennial, congratulations, you've done your job well, because they have got the message, you are what you eat, and in particular, children are what they eat, and they do not want to feed unhealthy food to their children. The millennials are the first generation in over 100 years that have so incorporated that message that they are spending more on food as a percentage of their budget than any other generation has been willing to spend for 100 years. Every generation has demanded more food at lower cost, and the millennials are saying, I get it, I understand it. Healthy food is worth spending money on because I would rather pay the farmer than pay the hospital. And they are doing it. So the millennials in the room, congratulations, you are leading the way to a healthy food system, and thank you. I keep moving this around so it goes in different directions. As you can see, there's a whole lot of things that people are worried about. Pesticides, hormones, antibiotics, GMOs. People have the message that this is what industrial ag is doing to their food, and they're concerned. It's really interesting, and 85, almost 86% of the population thinks that GMOs should be labeled. And you know, there's that big debate out there about GMOs, about the science or not science and all of that. We could probably spend the whole time on GMOs, but let me just leave it with this. The science isn't settled. GMOs have not been proven safe for the long term. There have been no long-term studies. And you know what? When it comes to your children and the food you feed, you don't want to wait for the long-term studies. You want to make sure they're safe. And there have never, ever been any studies, there have been zero scientific studies on the combined effects of all these things in a food system. So think about a can of Coke. You've got a toxic chemical cocktail right there. You've got high fructose corn syrup is the main ingredient. High fructose corn syrup is all conventional, so that means it's all GMO, it's full of pesticides, it's full of insecticides, you know, all the residue, it's all there. It is inside of a can that's lined in BPA. So you have GMO plus pesticides, plus herbicides, plus the BPA that lines the can. Nobody has even fully researched one of those items, let alone the combined effect. So consumers, one of the things that you'll see in a minute, that we've been very successful in moving companies away from these awful things because they get it. They see it in the data. They know that consumers are smart, and they know that if you put all these things together, one of them is going to be a problem, and all of them together are going to be a worse problem. So it's not a fad. It's not a trend. It's, as you'll see in a minute, it's a tsunami. People are really concerned. Here is an example of the tsunami. Companies are responding fast. In 2013, literally, if you were trying to talk to a food company about changing their ingredients, it was like this. Didn't want to talk to you, didn't want to hear about it, didn't want to look at the data, but thanks to everybody going out there and supporting their local food, supporting their farmers markets, turning away from the traditional foods. Soda share of market is plummeting. Meat share of market is plummeting. All of a sudden, the companies are starting to listen. So you can now have conversations with companies about moving them off of these terrible things. So as you can see, nothing happened in 2013. In 2014, we start our tsunami. Cheerios removes GMOs. Chobani commits to removing commits to non-GM and organic feed for their cows. Campbell's released 200 products of organic. Just in this year, Hershey's transitions to non-GMO sugar. Chipotle just 2 weeks ago announced that they were removing GMOs from their menu. As you can see, we're getting a tsunami of one after another of companies removing some of these awful ingredients from their supply chains. It's just phenomenal. I'm very proud to say, I'll just do a minute to say, my team at Green America, we run something called the GMO Inside campaign that pressures company to remove bad things from their products and to clean up their supply chain. And I'm very proud to say that our team led the victories on all of these. And if you ever wonder, you know, does it make a difference if you sign those petitions online, if you call the companies, if you place things on their Facebook? Answer is yes. Every time you do that, that gives us extraordinary clout to be able to pressure these companies into changing their supply chains. So just a little hint, they do different things. When you sign a petition, that means I can walk into a company, my team can walk into a company and say, your customers are demanding change. You better look at this data. And 2 years ago, again, they didn't want to look at it. They would accept the data. They would look at it with one eye. But they put their own marketing teams on it. Campbell's now has 100 people looking at what people are concerned about in their food, and they're seeing these exact problems. Nobody wants that stuff. So that's why these things are moving rapidly. So when you sign a petition, it gives us the clout to do these things. When you call a company, You sign the petition and then you call the company. That's really important because they tally every call. Every call that you make to an 800 line to say, I want you to clean up your food system, your supply chain, that costs the company at least $10, maybe $20. So they pay a lot of attention. Of course, be nice to the person answering the phone. They're not making the decisions, but they will get that information to management. When you put a complaint on their Facebook page, that's really great because that's their town square. They want to control that message. And guess what? If there's a lot of people complaining about an ingredient, there are a lot of the companies are paying a lot of attention. So all of those strategies make a big difference. So thank you for all of you for giving us the clout to do that. I'm very excited, and I want you all to send good energy to my team because I've got a team in Denver tomorrow. So as the summit is going on, I got a team in Denver tomorrow meeting with the 3 biggest users of pork in the country, 3 companies that use the most pork in the country, to create what we're calling the all-in gold standard. We started with a non-GMO conversation. Can we please get non-GMO and organic feed for your hogs? And then it was really great when you get the whole supply chain in the room and you start talking about these things. Finally, the consciousness came that non-GMO and organic is important. They're necessary, but we have to do more. We also have to consider the animal welfare. We also have to consider the human welfare. So we want to create an all-in gold standard. And the reason why even these very largest companies need to collaborate on this is because all of them only, they don't buy the whole hog. They don't go whole hog. Some of them buy the loins. Some of them buy the bacon. Some of them buy, so the parts of the hog nobody buys a whole hog unless you're doing local food, which is why local food is so important. The whole industrial system chops up hogs and chops up cows and all of that, and they send them in different places. So in order to really get the utilization out of the system and reduce costs for better systems, we have to create collaborations amongst companies so that they can create an all-in gold standard to use the whole hog. That same whole thinking that has to be true of chickens. When Chipotle came on the scene, the chicken breasts were the things that people bought the most in grocery stores, and dark meat was wasted, pretty much. Chipotle came on the scene, they buy all the dark meat, so now it's the opposite. There's more dark meat than light meat. So again, how do you get people together to make sure we're using the whole chicken so that we can use the systems more efficiently? So that's some of the exciting stuff going on. Just to let you know, the next few things that we're working on is Starbucks, trying to encourage them to switch to organic milk. How many people think of Starbucks as a coffee company? Yeah? They actually sell more milk than coffee on a weight basis. So if you want to, they're one of the biggest milk users in the country, so if you want more organic milk in the scene, let's get Starbucks to use it. We're also putting pressure on Sabra, who's owned by Pepsi, to get GMOs out of hummus. The reason we're looking at that is because hummus uses a lot of soy oil. Soy is almost all GMO. So again, as leverage points to the system, if we can move that, that will be very important. And we're also going to be launching an effort. This is actually confidential. To make sure that we do not get GMO wheat. Right now, wheat is not GMO. But our friends in the biotech industry, and about 20 years ago, everybody working together stopped GMO wheat. And the way we stopped it is we made an alliance with farmers who didn't want to have GMO wheat because nobody wants it in the export markets. Well, our friends in the biotech industry don't take defeat lightly, and they'll plan for 20 years to change people's minds. So they've been spending 20 years to do 2 things. Convince farmers that they really need GMO in their wheat. Don't ask me why, because they're doing great with wheat right, as it is. And number 2, to change all those trade agreements so other countries can't say no to GMO. So we've got to make sure that we don't have GMO wheat. So we're going to be working on that over the next couple of years and hope that you'll join with us because guess what? Wheat is one of those other big crops, and so far it's been non-GMO. To do that, if you're on your machines right now, we can keep you in touch with all of this. Just sign up at greenamerica.org. You can sign up for all of our newsletters for free, either at greenamerica.org or gmoinside.org. So thank you for all that you do. So we have to accelerate this. It's all good news so far, but we have to accelerate it. Remember, we got to go from 1% to 100%. But before we go there, I know that when I give presentations like this to companies, this is the point that they all go, but wait, stop. I get it. The food system isn't sustainable. I get it. Consumers want it to be healthy and sustainable. But can we feed the world with sustainable organic food? So that's the conversation. So in case any of you are at that moment when you're wondering that, let me tell you this. Yes, we can. I'm not just making this up. Organic yields, year in, year out, study after study, are as good as conventional yields. In fact, organic is, of course, more resilient to water reduction. The organic soil, good, healthy organic soil retains water, so it's more drought resistant. And so it's also more sustainable in hard times, which we're going to have a lot of with climate change. Again, not making this up, universities of Iowa, Illinois, Michigan, universities all over Europe, when they do honest to goodness, real studies, yield to yield, crop to crop, farm to farm, organic yields equal conventional yields. So to the extent that we're feeding the world now, we can continue to do it with organic. So don't worry about it. We can absolutely do it. And as you probably know, when it comes to feeding the world, we could feed the world right now with what we have, and then we could replace what we have on conventional yields with organic yields because they're the same. You know, I said wonk, you know, if A equals B, then we can use A or B. So whatever we're doing now with A, conventional industrial agriculture, we can do with B, organic agriculture. You follow my math here? Thank you, you're good. But the real issues about why we're not feeding the world are because at least 40 to 50% of our food goes to waste. In the US, it's interesting, most of that is waste after it leaves the farm, because we're pretty efficient in getting it off the farm. In the developing countries, there's a bigger problem of getting the food off the farm on time before it spoils. But in either case, 40 to 50% goes to waste. So we have a lot to do about waste. If you're concerned about food justice, waste is really important. Distribution, of course, is really important. And trade and other policies, well, we could spend a whole summit on that as well. But those are the real issues. So don't let anyone tell you that you can't feed the world with sustainable agriculture. And then finally, when you are thinking about sustainable agriculture, so that you can really help people think about this in a system perspective, is that full utilization we talked about a minute ago, the whole hog, that's also really important when it comes to all organic agriculture. How do you make sure that we're fully utilizing, whether it's the full milk component, whether it's the full field? So let me talk about that for a minute, because I think whole hog is pretty easy to get, but whole field is really important to think about full field utilization. Really wonky term. But when people plant organically, one of the things that's very different from organic farming and conventional GMO farming, with conventional GMO farming, you know, the GMOs are made to carry the pesticides, right? Some of us say, you know, the old razor and razor blade, give the razor away for free so people have to buy razor blades. Well, that's true for GMOs. You know, what GMOs do is sell a lot of pesticides to farmers. So they can do that. They can pour pesticides on with a GMO, and then you can it kills the soil, and then you can put a lot of fertilizer on, and you can keep, you know, basically doing that over and over with more pesticides, more fertilizers. As you can see, not sustainable in any dimension. But with organic, you rotate crops. So organic farming can also be more profitable than conventional farming, especially as you develop your soil asset. And it depends on the market. Right now, today, organic corn sells at $12 to $14 a bushel. Conventional corn, all GMO, sells at $2 to $3 a bushel. Sounds like a no-brainer. Why wouldn't everybody be an organic farmer? Well, you have to consider organic farmers have to rotate crops to keep the soil up, to make sure that pests stay down, to make sure that the weeds stay down. And so maybe they can only plant corn 2 out of 3 years. So they have to have full field utilization. They have to know that in that third year of the rotation, they can also sell whatever their rotation crop is into the markets for good money. So one of the concepts we're talking about with big companies now is, could you make contracts with farmers for full field utilization? Just like, you want people to buy the whole hog, so the hog farmers have every incentive to go organic and high animal welfare and farmer justice. So too, maybe giving organic farmers the ability to sell all of the things that they're growing, making commitment to their full field rotations. You see, it's a really new concept, but that's what it's going to take, really changing the thinking about how you sell. So full field utilization for farmers, so that, for example, say they're planting rye in their rotation. Do you know that there's almost no market for rye? Rye is a miracle thing to put in your rotation because it has a natural toxin that it puts into the soil that will kill the weeds for the next rotation. So farmers love it. But if they grow rye, there's almost no market for it. Now, if we could figure out markets for that rye, that would help the organic farms be even more profitable. So things like that. Another really interesting thing to think about in terms of moving organic along, when we try to think of, when we do analysis, system analysis, we think about what are the forces that are working with you and how do you accelerate them? What are the forces that are working against you and how do you stop them? And what are the crosswinds? Things that are sort of like wild cards. And one of the wild cards is that many people in the conventional farming community don't like the idea of organic farming because they believe, not that it, belief is not equal to reality sometimes. They believe it means giving up all of their tools and technologies and going back to the days when farming was hard labor. They don't realize that in the same period of time when people were inventing GMOs, that there was a lot of science-based precision eco-agriculture being developed. So maybe instead of having organic farms, maybe we should have science-based precision eco-agriculture to offer conventional farmers so that they would know that we're not making their tools and technologies go away. So anyway, just something to think about. So sustainable food for all, yes we can. And I want to lay on one more thing about why we must. I don't know, there's going to be several presentations on this at the summit, and it is so great. In the last couple of years, there have been several studies that prove what every organic farmer knows, is that healthy soil actually traps carbon, is carbon sequestration. So, there's a new concept of carbon farming. If we could make 50% of our acres under cultivation organic, we would be able to prevent the increase of carbon in the atmosphere and prevent that 2-degree rise that everybody is so fearful of. This truly changes everything. So organic farming, restorative organic farming that restores the soil, is the only thing that we have that at scale could actually sequester carbon and reverse the carbon already in the atmosphere. As you could guess, I'm kind of a solar wonk. I love solar. We've worked very hard on making sure the system of solar can work. But solar can only prevent new carbon from going into the air. Organic soil can sequester carbon. So not only can we, but we must if you care about food and energy. So, let me sort of summarize where we've come to give you a system view of all the things we've talked about, what the food menu for sustainable food future looks like. So here are the pressure points. We sometimes think of it as the acupressure points in the system, the highly leveraged things that we need to be doing. And you'll recognize all the ones that you're involved in. So we need to build local food systems. Check. That was our largest group back there. We need to demand non-GMO and organic feed. Because as you saw at the very beginning of this presentation, most of the crops that we grow in this country are for feed, not food. So we need to demand that the food, the dairy, the meat, the poultry, if you are going to eat meat, make sure that it's non-GMO and organic. It's hugely important. Let me also say in this one, the importance, everyone I'm sure has heard that if you're vegan, you are doing a huge piece for climate change. It's like not owning a car. And yet so we have to do the next thing, which is one of the things here is to shift diets to plant-based. But that scares a lot of people, right? They don't want to give up their meat. So one of the things to think about is if we could actually get beef consumption down to 1/2 pound per person per week, we could get very close to the plant-based diet benefits, and we could raise all of our beef on grass-fed, which is much better for the environment and would cut out all the need for that terrible corn and soy, all that GMO corn and soy. So something to think about in terms of the whole system. Obviously, we have to reduce food loss and waste. There's that limit beef to 1/2 pound per week and make it grass-fed. By the way, when you do that, you reduce the number of cows from about, where are we at this? Oh, I've forgotten, right? I think about 20 million to under 1 million cows. So it's really, per year, it's really amazing. We have to stop using cropland for fuel, get rid of that ethanol business, and we have to insist on economic justice for farmers and farm workers. So any of that sound familiar? Are you folks working on that? All right. Hear, hear. And on the food supply, we have to move to that full utilization thinking to go whole hog and whole field. We have to focus on restorative organic agriculture. We have to boost organic yields through this precision eco-agriculture and invite conventional farmers to partake in this wonderful precision eco-agriculture. By the way, what do I mean by that? At about the same time that GMOs were introduced, so were these amazing big seed planters that big farms use that can precisely plant seeds within millimeters. And those alone increase the yields. Forget the GMOs. Brazil went with the machines and not the GMOs, and they got the same yield increases as our farmers did. So that precision is really important, and of course, organic farmers can use that precision too. Of course, we have to improve the soil and water management. There's some great opportunities as we're doing soil restoration to expand into degraded lands. Back to that fish, we have to stabilize the wild fish catch and reduce it first and then stabilize it. We have to improve the environmental performance of aquaculture because it's promising, but some of it is not done very well at all. Something we didn't talk about because we were talking mostly about domestically, but we have to talk about water management in rice production, and we have to improve feed conversion for livestock. What I mean by that is if the livestock can eat food and turn more of it into, it can eat feed and turn more of it into food, whether it's milk or meat, then of course that's better for everybody, and it makes them very happy too. They don't get crummy tummy. So, and there's some of the new research on probiotics can do exactly that because we've moved animals off their traditional diet, which is why we've got food conversion reduction. I warned you about the wonky. Talk to me later if you want to talk about that. So, sorry, hitting the button too fast here. What I want to leave you with here is what it takes, and you'll see how all of this fits together. I want to talk about the meta strategies for system change. And I want to do this for two reasons, so that you can see how all the things we talked to fit together. And I also want to do it because sometimes in our movements for change, we do a lot of arguing with each other about what the right strategies are. And if you understand what the meta strategies are, you can understand which strategies go together, and you can stop arguing. Because we need them all. You all know from ecosystem science that the most robust ecosystems are the ones that are most diverse. So if you want a system for change, you need a diverse set of strategies. So every time you hear somebody arguing about this strategy is better than that strategy, think about what the meta strategies are and whether or not there's really a strategic conflict or whether they're talking about different kinds of strategies and you need to say, bless you, go do that, we need that, that's the thing you're passionate about, other people need to do this because we need them both. Do you see what I'm saying? So we need everybody and we need all their energy and we need all their strategies. So let's eliminate the arguments. So in no particular order, because you need all of these, but this is how you think about system change. The first thing we have to do is stop the damage of the old destructive system. Interestingly, in the food system, one of the reasons why I love trying to stop GMOs is because GMOs are a big leverage point in stopping the damage of the old system. The GMOs are bad in and of themselves. They require a lot of chemicals and fertilizers and pesticides, which just increases the chemical agricultural industrial complex. And so if you go after the GMOs, what you're doing is you're stopping some of the destruction. It's necessary but not sufficient because you also have to create and scale the new living systems. So that's the local food, that's the organic. We have to think about how we create and scale them. And it's really important to think about the scale, because remember, only 4% of the acres under cultivation are fruits and vegetables. So we got to do that. But we got to think bigger than that. So we have to think about how we're going to get corn to be organic, how we're going to get soy to be organic, how to get cotton to be organic. So we have to think about that whole picture about how to get the scale on the organic. We need to build the lifelines from the old to the new. As the new systems scale up and the old systems start to die off, we want to invite everybody over to the better party, right? So remember when I showed you the collapse of the coal industry? Well, one of the things behind that is that the number of coal miners is down to about 80,000. Just 5 years ago, it was 160,000, and before that, it was tenfold that amount in the 10 years before that. Most of the people in the coal mining industry are over 55, and so it's time to thank them for a transition strategy that's now possible since renewable energy is scaling up and the stock prices of coal is tanking. It's now possible to say, let's thank the coal miners for their service. They risked their lives for the energy system. Let's give them a retirement equal to with military benefits and military health care benefits. It would only cost $2 billion a year, which is a drop in the bucket, believe me, in benefits providing, and we could just retire that whole industry. That's an example of, as you go to scale, you can take care of everybody. There's no reason to leave people behind because we're shifting a system, right? And we can think about all the ways that can be true in agriculture as well. The fourth meta strategy is to tell the new stories. It's really important for people to hear the stories of what's going wrong with the old system and the exciting news about how the new system is scaling. People don't know these stories. People don't know how we're going to have not just me saying it, but Google saying 50% of the electricity in this country is going to be solar by 2025. Not just me, the solar activist, saying that. We showed the same data to the elite team in Google that does forecasting, that does technology forecasting, and they said, based on solar growth, solar is going to be 25% of the electricity system. Oh, Devin, I messed it up. Can you get me back? Oh, Ben & Jerry's, another really great company that's doing great things to turn the system. All the way to the very end. See, now you're getting the whole reprise. Isn't that better than a summary? Oh, cool. Devin, thank you for saving me. Oh, man. This is great. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, there we are. Tell the new stories. So they need to know the stories about what's going bad, but Americans don't like to hear it. They close off when they hear the terrible stuff. One of the reasons why we have climate denial is not only for the usual reasons that everybody knows, it's because it's so awful to think about that your children and your grandchildren might be in the middle of that crisis, is as people shut down when they hear about it. So they're doing a natural thing. They're just like, they can't face it, so they're denying it. I've even heard people on our side say, don't tell me another bad story about climate. I can't bear the thought of it. Let's put all of our energy into working for the better things. So Americans want to hear the good news. We had the opportunity to work with an amazing Madison, believe it or not, Madison Avenue company on what sells the stories about energy. It wasn't telling them bad stories about climate. It wasn't patriotic messages about being oil independent. It wasn't cute kids running across the fields with windmill in the back. It was the city of Chicago lit up at night saying, renewable energy, we're making enough renewable energy to power every major city in the country, let's make more. Americans want to know that it's going to work. So tell the new stories about what's working. And then finally, see if I can get this one right. It's really important to nurture the consciousness and culture change to educate people for collaborative leadership. So underneath all of these things, that's one of the things that's so important about local food. Not only is it actually putting local organic acreage under cultivation, everybody who eats it is getting their consciousness changed. And that's why we have millions and millions and millions of people demanding that big companies change their ways when it comes to food. So it's the consciousness change. When you think about your strategy, what is the consciousness change you're educating for? Not just the information, but the consciousness change underneath that. Those meta-strategies are what changes systems. So think about it, again, I've heard some arguments between non-GMO and organic. Oh my goodness, no. Non-GMO is doing strategy one. It's stopping the damage of the old system. Organic is bringing up the new living systems. Both of them do a great job of educating and consciousness changing. When people think about GMOs and what are they feeding to their children, they all of a sudden become advocates for sustainable agriculture. So all of that is working. So you see how this goes? So no matter what you're working on, think about these strategies. And of course, you can change everything. I probably don't need to say this to this group, so I'm going to zip by it real quick. Obviously, organic, local, and green is the way to go. Choosing a plant-based diet is the way to go. And again, it doesn't mean 100% plant-based, but if you can go from 25% in the conventional, 25 to 40% in the conventional diet to 80 to 90%, it'll change the whole system. It doesn't have to be all the way. Don't scare people. It doesn't have to be all the way. It would be great if it was, don't get me wrong. But just going from 40% to 80% could change everything. Think big. We need to not only think about the local food and vegetables, but think about food, feed, and fiber. And join system change campaigns. Now that you're thinking, hopefully I've got you more thinking about system change, join those campaigns because that's what propels it. And of course, we would be honored if you joined Green America. I know many of you are already members, but please do join us. But supporting people like the Strolling of the Heifers, supporting people that are doing all this great work in Vermont to change the systems, that's what changes the system. So keep up all your good work. And of course, remember, we don't have to have a crisis. The Stone Age didn't end because we ran out of stones. It's folk wisdom. People change when they see a better party, and they change fast when they see a better party. I gave you several examples here, but think of the ultimate one, the industrial era. Literally, we went from the previous agriculture era to the industrial era, and depending on how you measure it, in less than 20 years. Yes, it took a lot to build up to it, but when we hit the tipping points, it happened fast. And how you can tell you've changed an era is because you can't imagine what life was like before. Even when you read a lot, really thinking about what life was like before the industrial era, it's hard to grasp experientially. And that's what it's going to be like. If we put these tipping points together on energy and food and finance and labor, we're going to create a better party, and the system can shift very fast. So, of course, this is what's at stake. Got to do it. So that's what I wanted to tell you today about system and system change. Thank you for hanging in there with me on all this wonky stuff. I guess the next time you might not give me that much permission, but thank you anyway. And I think, Shanta, how are we doing? Do we have a little bit? Oh, we're great. We have time for questions and answers and conversation. So, does anyone have a question? Oh, and by the way, if I could ask so we could get a lot in this section, think of your question as spicy and brief. Think of it like a tweet. in 150, 180 characters or so. All right? So I'm going to come over here, and if you could say your name and where you're from and what your question in the form of a tweet. Oh, Devin, thank you. Or Jonathan is going to help me with this. Great. Thanks. We have a gentleman right here. Right here, can you see? Who would like to ask a question?
How much of renewable generation is from biomass, ethanol, and biodiesel?
And biodiesel. So right now it's actually fairly small. In terms of our entire U.S. energy mix, if I'm remembering right, I'm trying to look at those graphs in my brain, it's probably around 1 to 3%. So it is small, and we have to make sure it stays small. So, and in some areas it's more, so it kind of depends on what state you're on. But if you look at it net, and the reason why it's small, and people might say, well, but in my state it might be more, is because we have certain states, like the Pacific Northwest, that have zero, and they generate so much from their hydro resources. So when you add that all up across the system, it's less than you think, but I'm sure from many of our perspectives, too much. So, and one way to think about that conversation from the food perspective, since this is a food summit this year at the Slow Living Summit, is to think about no cropland for fuel. Good question. Important system thinking. All right, let's move over here to the very front.
My name is Emily Ryan. I'm from here originally. My question is about your metrics for the companies that you've created change in. Right. How you measure actual intercultural change versus greenwashing?
So first of all, the gold standard is to have them independently verified. That's the gold standard. I have to confess, all of the people on that list, we don't yet have to independently verified. But one of the things that when you join organizations like ours or others who work on system change is that we don't stop at the victory. And let me give you an example. Hershey's, we put pressure on Hershey for 4 years, to stop child labor especially forced child labor in the cocoa fields in West Africa, where most of the cocoa is grown. And it took 3 years to get them to the negotiating table. How many here remember signing those petitions and putting pressure on Hershey's? Thank you. Took 3 years, but you did it. When we got them to the negotiating table, we worked out a settlement that it would take them 8 years to transition. Because one of the things we want to be big, bold, and compelling, but we also want to note that to move these big supply chains takes some time. And anyway, we worked out a plan. It was going to take 8 years. We had milestones for them. They were also, as part of those milestones, they were going to identify which of the independent verifiers they were going to go with. We're into year 3 right now. Oh, and we have quarterly calls where they have to report out to us. So they're into the 3rd year. I'm really happy to report they are actually slightly ahead of schedule, so they're on target and slightly ahead of schedule. I believe they will make it. And P.S., it has every victory you can stand on the shoulders of the last one. So when we started talking with them about non-GMO, we actually specifically talked about non-GMO and sugar. Which is where a lot, again, that crop, sugar beet in particular, is high in non-GMO. So we started them with sugar. And they got it. They already had the learning about how to do the orderly transition. So it was very quick to work out with them how to get that done. So the gold standard is independent verification, but we also know that you got to take steps. So we try to work with steps on all of them and move to that gold standard. So we do both the reporting out and the independent verification. Great. How about back there? Hi.
You didn't mention hemp at all in your talk, and I'm wondering if there's any initiative at all to increase the use of hemp and the growing of hemp. I know it's now in research stage in many states, Vermont being one of them. as a fuel, a fiber, a food, building material, many, many, many uses of hemp.
Hemp is really a great crop because it needs, even if you're growing it conventionally, it needs much less water and much less pesticide than similar crops. And of course, you can grow it organically. So there's been a great movement in this country to try to get it re-allowed back in this country. And I know a lot of companies in the organic food industry are working really hard on that and can hardly wait to be able to source it domestically. So it would be another boon it would really help. It's one of these system change things that would really help the overall system shift because it would give yet another crop for organic farmers to use in their tool chest. So yeah, very good point on hemp and good work in Vermont. All right, we have a person here and then a person over there.
Yes, my name is Gary Klippel, and I own Longfield Farm, and I'm also a professor at SUNY Albany in New York. And my questions are, do you see a way of separating industrial organic from non-industrial organic? And do you see a trend toward going non-GMO that's affordable for the small-scale operator? We can't afford non-GMO feed for our chickens.
So on the question of non-GMO feed, that is you have put your finger exactly on one of the system problems we have right now. There isn't enough demand for it in the system to be able to aggregate it in an inexpensive way. And so one of the things that my organization does is brings together supply chains to work on collaborations to try to solve some of those problems. You know, what you have to think about from a sort of a wonky perspective, you have to think about getting the non-GMO seed planted, then you have to get it transported, you got to keep it separate all along the way, so the silos, the transporters, all of that has to happen, then it has to get to the feed mill, and it has to be segregated there. So we're actually working on a project right now to look at how could we bring to New York and New England more of that aggregation. If you can do that aggregation, that will bring the price down without harming the farmer. So you see, that's, you know, these are the things you have to think about all along the way. If you can get unnecessary costs out of the system, then it can provide more money for everybody, from the farmer to the person who eats the food. So those are some of the challenges in both non-GMO and organic. We now have to do the system thinking. That's why these hubs are important. That's why these regional systems are important. That's why with this collaboration that I talked about in Denver, getting together all the people who are working on with anything in the hog or pork system, if we can figure out how to do that, then we'll be able to get prices down we'll actually be able to get prices down at the same time as getting more money to the farmer. So it's this time of the system change to really be doing that work. So stay tuned and look for collaborations. On the question of organic and sort of, you know, I might say local organic versus large-scale industrial organic, this is going to be a huge question. And what I would do is I would kind of think about it, again, on a system change perspective. One of the interesting things, going back to the energy as a case study, how many people are familiar with the climate wedges? So all right, I'll try to do it real quick. So, you know, carbon is going into the air. Think of it like, you know, a graph. Think of my arm as the graph. It's skyrocketing into the air. And what we want to do is the opposite. We want it to go down, right? So if you think about between going business as usual and where we want it to go, this hand. And so what you want to do is you want to think about all of the different things you have to do to get from this one up here to this one down here, right? So the climate wedges are about, and there used to be fierce arguments. Oh, we should have solar. No, we should have wind. No, we should have energy efficiency. I mean, people used to actually debate whether or not to have solar or energy efficiency. And what the climate wedges do is say, you know what? We need them all. So there is a wedge for solar. There's what solar has to do. There's what energy efficiency has to do. There's what wind has to do. There's what we have to do by changing the structures of our buildings. There's what we have to do by reducing the amount of miles we've driven. We need to do all of those things, right? Well, I think we have to think about the sustainable agriculture problem in the same way. I think that if we're going to talk about row crops, if we're going to talk about getting rid of that GMO industrial or corn and soy, we're going to have to think about how do we do that efficiently at scale. So there may be a wedge that we all agree that we will have it be, if you will, industrial organic. And then we have to say, but that wedge is going to be this big, and we want the more local, sustainable, distributed farming to be this wedge, to have it be bigger. And we then can start thinking about what the transition would look like. What would the ownership structures have to look like? How would you make sure that the farms could still get the efficiencies? Can you stand one more piece of wonk? One of the problems with organic farm, not a problem, but with small organic farms is that they don't have the opportunity to buy this precision equipment, right? So is there a way to create, some of the conversation is like called stacked farms, or going back to the old idea of a farmer's cooperative, so that a farming system could get the benefits of all that precision. So what I would say is we have to really think carefully about what wedge we want to address each of those things. And I think at least for the transition of going from that 1% where we are now to being way up that curve, we're probably going to need a wedge of industrial organic. But we shouldn't fight it. So we shouldn't spend all our time fighting industrial organic versus local organic. We should say, okay, that's going to play this role for the transition. Local organic is where we want to go, and have clear transition strategies. Does that make sense? Because while we're busy fighting each other on 1% of the land, we got the other 99% we got to convert. We're going to go next over here.
Hi, I'm Josh from Maine, and my question is, all of this is operating within a capitalism system, and that's based on the profit motive, which is essentially getting more than you put in. So how can that premise lead to an end where everyone is fed and where justice is available when the motivation cannot, by law, be equal distribution? It needs to be concentrated in one direction.
Ultimately, you're absolutely right. And so we have, maybe next year's Slow Living Summit can be on slow economics. But at the end of the day, we're going to have to think about what do those wedges for economic transition look like? Starting with ownership questions, starting with margin questions. In every supply chain we've ever looked at, there's a very tricky thing that happens, that when you look at the whole supply chain. So let me take this out of the realm of food for a second and go to electronics, okay? But this is true of every supply chain I've ever seen. If you map each part of the supply chain and who the producers are and what margin they get, there's always a place in the supply chain where the margins concentrate. And people at either end of the supply chain get very little margin. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you can think of the iPhone supply chain, I think everybody knows that the workers in China don't get very much, and plus they're exposed to a lot of toxic chemicals and all kinds of other terrible working conditions along the way. And Apple makes 45 to 50% margin on every iPhone. Now, one of the problems is that one of the players in the middle, everybody has probably heard the Foxconn story, right? Well, I am no fan of Foxconn, but Foxconn, Apple, pardon my language, literally, because you can imagine this literally with a screwdriver, tries to screw not every nickel, not every dime, but every penny out of every single motion in the supply chain. So Foxconn gets about 6 to 7% margin. The workers get nothing, negative nothing, maybe how you could say it. Foxconn gets 6 to 7%, and Apple gets 45 to 50% margin. So even before we change the monetary system, there's probably things that can be done there. So Foxconn at 6 to 7%, again, no fan of Foxconn, but you know that old quote from Casablanca, like, I'm shocked that gambling is going on in here? Well, when you're asking Foxconn to run a 1 million-person labor force on 6 to 7% margin, what do you expect but that they're going to cut corners, right? So there is definitely a huge economic conversation to go on that, to talk about what are the steps that can be taken to deal with margins along the supply chain. It happens in the food supply chain too. Guess, a lot of the food manufacturers, the ones that are making good margin. Farmers, not so much, as everybody knows. Retailers, not so much, as everyone knows. And retailers have a strategy for that. More and more retailers are securing their own food supply. And guess what? Every single retailer, this is another one of the tipping point stories, every single retailer in the country, SuperValu, Wegmans, Safeway, Costco, Target, Walmart, every single one of them is going to organic. Because that's what their customers want, and because they go to organic with their house brands, that means they're going to be like a food manufacturer and they're going to have profitable margin. So they're looking at the supply chain going, maybe we need to be actually supplying the food. So, but there are cool transition models you can do. Let me tell you the story of what Wegmans is doing. So Wegmans, how many people know Wegmans? People know? Okay, because I know they're headquartered in upstate New York in Rochester. So they are committing almost all of their future investment to increasing their own organic lines. So one of the things they have a very cool transition strategy. One of the things they're doing is they have their own bakery, their conventional bakery, and they bake they contract with the farmers, they mill the grain, they bake the bread, they send it to their stores. They're starting an organic bakery line, and they are inviting farmers to transition from conventional to organic. Well, one of the difficulties in transitioning is that if you're a farmer, there are 3 years when you're in the transition period where you can't get the organic premiums. You can't sell it as organic, but you're doing all of the during the transition years. So a lot of farmers that's one of the big reasons why a lot of farmers are reluctant to convert. So what Wegmans is doing is they're literally financing the farmers who are willing to convert by paying the organic premium during the transition period and they're buying the wheat or whatever at the organic price, even though it's still not technically organic. They're putting it into their conventional side. And then when they get certified organic, they're going to continue to pay the premium and put it on their organic side. Remember I said at the beginning, I think that every single one of you could be telling a great story up here. I'm kind of sneaking that in when I say restorative organic agriculture, because the reality is it's kind of inherent in the industrial organic question. The reality is there are ways that, I'm sorry to say, that you can do organic that doesn't really build the soil. And so saying restorative, regenerative, organic agriculture is saying exactly that it's already using so many words. So one of the challenges I'd like to put out to you is how we name these things so that we can really get people thinking about going beyond organic without putting organic down, because the last thing we need to do when we're only 1% of acres under organic is to say, forget about organic, we have to do this. We have to do both, right? And again, when you do the permaculture, when you do the decentralized, when you do the local, when you try to set your food, like give yourself the, Vicki, what is it? Yours is a 30-mile food challenge? 10-day, 100-mile food challenge. How can you eat for 10 days with food that came within 100 miles of your home? Every time you do that, not only are you shifting acreage, but you're shifting minds and hearts. So it is really important. That wedge of how we get from 1% to 100% is really, really important. And we have to recognize we have to do all of the above, just like with I hope, if anything you carry from this conversation tonight is that we need all of it. We can't do only the one. I never want to hear another argument about solar versus efficiency, and I never want to hear another argument about organic versus biodynamic. We need all of them, because the bigger problem is that 99% that are not doing it. So perhaps a little controversial, but what I'm really trying to do is open people's hearts and minds to the idea of how do we get from that 1% to that 100%. And I want to leave you with this: we can do it. We're doing it with energy. We're actually doing it with food. These examples I gave you tonight are what I believe are examples of the turning points coming rapidly. And when we have the summit again in 5 years and have the same conversation, I believe I'm going to be showing you the same kind of really rapid system change, so that hopefully we can be talking about, yes, we did it. We got from 1% to 20% in 5 years. How do we get from 20% to 50% in the next 5 years? So I thank you for all you do to move those percentages. I thank you all you do for the health and well-being of every single person on this planet. And I encourage you, good speed and Godspeed, to do ever more of it and inspire ever more people. Thank you very much.